This is a tutorial for getting started in Unreal 427. So what I have here is I've gone into the Epic Game Launcher and I click New. You can see all my existing projects are Unreal 426. If this is your first time, you won't see recent projects because obviously you're starting a new one. So what you will get is this new projects category. I'm going to click Games because that's what we're doing here and click Next. From there, I have templates. I'm going to go ahead and select the third person template and then say next. And then I have an option for where to store my project. I'm just going to leave it here at the default. I am going to give it a name. I'm going to call it ACC. Oops, 20, click inside here. I didn't have numlock on 2202 because it's the second semester of the year 22, so this is summer. Or you could do ACC 22 summer, whatever you want to name it. Now, if this is your first time, you should go ahead and just install with starter content. There's a number of things in there. There's some textures, materials it comes with. It also comes with some particles like fire if you want to add fire to your scene. In future projects, you can choose to do it without. The rest of this is perfect. This is exactly what we want. So we're going to click Create Project. And that's going to go away and it's going to start booting up. So I'm going to pause at the moment while it does that. Oh, that was fast. Okay, so here we go. I'm back. All right, so what's happened is if I come here to an Explorer window and if I go to my documents, there's a folder in there. That's the location we specified, Unreal Projects. And inside it, there's this 22 summer. And inside there, you see that it has created all this information. And so if I go into like content, right? Now, if I come over here, this is your basic Unreal screen. There may be new plugins. I'm just going to dismiss that, get rid of that. Down here at the content browser, this is, if I hover over at the edge of a window, I can drag it up just like 3ds Max to adjust how big the viewport is. I'm going to come over to the side and click. Next to arrows, there's this little dialog. If you hover, it says Show or Hide Resources panel. You want to open that up, right? Because that's going to show you where your this is the content browser. So the starter content is inside there, and we could go and click and find things like some generic pieces. If I left click inside the viewport here and drag with my mouse, it can move around. If I hold both mouse buttons at the same time and drag it around, it allows me to kind of move side to side and up and down. And if I just click with my right button, I'm able to change my view, right? So 2 to kind of move it side to side and up and down, 1 to move forward, left to move forward, right to orbit around your view. Okay. And something that'll help is if you click on an object and hit F. Oops. Oh no, that's not what I want. Weird. Let's try that again. I'm going to click on this object and hit F. Okay, and that focused in on it. So I click on this one and hit F. Huh. This is trying to open an external file. I'm just going to click on this little info here. This is called a document actor. I don't need it. I'm going to hit delete. So he's referencing something external. I don't want that. Everything else, I should be able to click F and just focus in on it. This is a text actor. You can go in and you can change what it says. You can say down and then delete it. All right, so you really don't need these objects in here. You could just delete them. You're going to see they're going to leave behind big dark shadows. All you would need to do is just hit build, and that's going to rebuild the lighting for you. It may ask you about setting up swarm connections. It may ask you to connect online. You could just allow it to do whatever, it'll be fine. There you go. So now it rebuilt lighting for us. The rest of this stuff you want to keep in here. You could probably get rid of these walls, actually. Click on these walls and delete them. But keep the floor, otherwise you're going to fall out of the world. All right, so let's talk about bringing in our first assets. So I'm going to go ahead and make a folder here called ACC. Oops. I don't want that there. I'm just going to delete that. And I'm going to come up here to, oops, I forgot delete has a, do you want to delete? Yes, I do. I'm going to come up to the main content folder, and inside there make a new folder, call that ACC Summer 22. All right, and so let's go ahead and let's bring something in here. I'm going to go ahead and inside this ACC Summer 22, I'm going to say new folder. I'm going to call this props. And inside, I'm going to come over here to the side. Now remember, I had clicked this button to show me this sort of navigation folder. And if I right click on this folder and say show and explorer, it's going to show me where that's located. So everything I bring in is going to be saved as a U asset inside this folder. But what I need to do is I need to bring in content. So I'm going to click import. I'm going to come up here to my Max 2023, to my scenes, to my Gladius. I'm going to grab all three of my textures, and I want the LP mesh. That's the low poly. LP stands for low poly, and that is your game res version of the mesh. So the first time you go to open something, you're going to get this FBX import options. Well, actually, this will always show up. The first time is the most important because you're going to do some things. You're going to turn off generate missing collision. You're going to click show advanced, and you want you to turn off generate light map UVs. And then you're going to scroll down to material, and I want you to turn off create new material. So you're going to say do not create, and you're going to turn off import textures. And that's it, and just say import all. It's going to bring those in. It's going to tell you that your normal was imported as a normal map, so we'll click OK. Let's open up our textures. Double click to open that. You can see even though the thumbnail displays as a square, your image is, as always, still this rectangle. So this is the base color. You can see it has default compression settings. If I open up the normal, that has special normal map compression settings for it. If I open up the ORM, the occlusion, roughness, and metallic, you'll see that has the default. The thing for this special ORM is you need to turn off sRGB. So if we turn that off, now it will go ahead and preserve those different maps. And so if I come in here and I turn off all of them except red, you see there's the red channel, that's our ambient occlusion. Here's the green, that's our roughness. And there's the blue, that's our metallic. And that's just a viewer, so we'll just save this. Close these because we didn't do anything. If we double click, that's going to open up our sword. Same controls inside here. If you click on, if you just hit F, it'll zoom in on your sword. If you hold the left button, it will allow you, as you move your mouse forward, to move through the space. Hold both buttons to pan side to side, up and down, and then the right button to orbit the camera, right? Orbit is when you kind of move based off of the pivot of where the camera's at. All right, so if I come in here, there's a bunch of buttons. If you don't see all the buttons, you just need to expand your screen as much as you can. There may be arrows to push over to the side if you have a low resolution screen. When I click UV, you see that it starts with UV channel 0. That's because Unreal starts at 0, Max starts at 1. So every time we're doing things in here, just know that our base channel is 0. That means our light maps will not be channel 2 in Unreal, they will be channel 1. Now this is, everything's unique, so I don't need to worry about light maps for this, but I do want to get my material on here. So I have textures, you can't just plug a texture in, we need to make a material. So I'm going to right click and say new material. We're going to do M_Gladius. And then we double click to open that up. And this looks a lot like Max, doesn't it? You have a material and you have the nodes coming off of it. So all we'll do is we'll just drag these in here one at a time. Let's start with the easy ones. Here's my base color. So I'm going to click the RGB because you want the red, the green, and the blue. You want all those channels combined. Drag that into base color. For the normal, same thing. I'm going to grab that RGB and drag and plug that into normal. Now, we were looking at the sword earlier, and I showed you that the sword has those different color channels in the ORM. Let's open that up and move it to the side. The RGB is everything combined, but if we go through and we turn off individual channels, here's the red. Now the red stands for occlusion. So I'm going to take that red channel and plug that into the ambient occlusion. If we go to the G, right, let's turn off the red so we only have G, right? Remember, what's the second letter? R, that stands for roughness. So I plug just the green channel, goes to roughness. And then if I come in here and go to blue, that's my metal, right? Because what's the last letter? That's the metal. That's why we labeled it with those letters to remind us what each one of these individual channels goes to. Now, take a good long look at this. This is how most of your materials are going to come in. You're going to have a base color. You're going to have a normal. Those are full RGB textures that get plugged in. So you plug the entire texture in. Anything you bake out of substance is going to have a packed map. And if it has a packed map like that, then you're going to be plugging those in to the ambient occlusion, the roughness, and the metallic. All right. If you hover, you can see them highlight. So that's the process for doing that. And you just hit save. And if we go back over to our Gladius here, I can take this material, just drag that up and plug it in. Now we could see how that looks inside there. If you hold L and click with your left button, you can move the light in the scene to see how it affects your object. So that's it for the Gladius. That's all we need to do for that one. Let's bring in another. All right, so this is kind of props. So let's go ahead and let's bring in a second here. Let's go ahead and bring in my column. There's the base color, the normal, the occlusion, roughness, metallic, and then the LP, right, that low poly. All those settings from before, it remembers, so I just say import all and they come in. So remember, first thing, open up that ORM, turn off sRGB and hit save. Now, we need to build a material for that. There's something that we could do. We could take this material here, this M Gladius, right click and say duplicate. If I do M underscore basic BC normal ORM. If I open that up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this what's called I'm going to turn this into a material that other cheaper instanced materials can reference. And by doing that, I just right click and say convert to parameter, and I type in BC for base color. Right click here, convert to parameter, call this ORM, and right click here, convert to parameter, and call this N for normal. All right. Now if I save this, let's see, I opened up the ORM, I turned off sRGB, that's good, I need to do that. Now, anything else that uses just this format of base color, normal, and ORM, we can come in, right click, go materials, material instance, and do MI underscore, and then just give it the name, and this would be column. You open that up and you get something that's very different. It's just this material, and you have this detail panels. If you take that M basic BC and ORM and drag it up there, you'll see that because I set those up as parameters, now all I need to do is just plug in my different textures. And so if I plug in my base color, my ORM, and my normal, and save that, I now have my textures for my column, which I can double click to open up. And I could take that column material and plug it in. So I don't need to build a material from scratch every single time. So if I hit save, this is ready to go. Again, this has its own unique UV layout, so when we click UV channel 0, it's fine. Now, one thing you can do is when you have an object that is just like this, where it's just one solid thing, you do collision, add box, simplify collision. You see how I put these simple green box on here? When I hit save, now I can place this in the world by just, all I did was click and drag it in there. I'm going to bring my sword in too. If I hit save. That's going to save my project. I'm going to come down here to the bottom and hit save all. And it's going to tell you everything that needs to be saved. You want to make sure you're saving often. If you hit play, you can run around, and it's okay if you run through the sword. It's small, it doesn't matter. But I won't be able to run through this because I brought it in and set collision on it. All right. Hit escape to get out of there. Escape on your keyboard. All right, so now I have those basic objects. So I could keep doing this if I right click and say import, and if I go to the wood elements, I can grab those wood pieces, select my weapon rack and say open. Everything's here, right? All those same settings, just like I want. I say import all, and it brings it in. So what do? Open up the ORM, turn off sRGB, hit save, right? And now this time, let's drag this up a little bit. This time I'm just going to right click on that column and say duplicate. I'm going to call mi underscore wood elements. And now I can just plug in my different materials. And you see, because I have those names there set up, I totally plugged them into the wrong ones, so let's fix that. There we go. The base color, the normal, and the ORM. Save them. That material set up. If I open up the weapon rack, I can drag that wood elements material on there. I can even come in and add box simplify collision, hit save. Now here's what's different about this one. If I go to UV and click on that, you see there's UV channel 0, which has all of my tiling textures on here. But if I go to UV1, you'll see, if you remember, I had you make that special set of light maps. Now Unreal knows that if there's multiple UV maps set up, what it'll do is, if I start collapsing these and get to general settings, and I'm going to click on the show advanced button here, it defaulted to use UV channel 1, right, which is that second channel. It's set to use that for light maps. So if you ever bring in an object and you have to make light maps later, you could always come in here, and because once you've brought an asset in, if you add any additional light maps channels or any others, you would have to change this later on your own, right? But because we brought it in, it just came in just fine. So hit save, close this, and now I can just drag my weapon rack in and rotate that around. All right, so this is kind of the basic process here. Now we could do additional things. Let's right click on our parent material here. I'm going to say duplicate, and I'm going to call this normal. Oops. I'm going to go to the end, and I'm just going to do an underscore 2s, and then open that up, and I'm going to click on the main material. Right, by default it grabs the main material. I'm just going to find over here on the side under parameters where it says two-sided. I'm going to turn that on and hit save. So the reason I would do that is, if I come up here to import, I'm going to come in here and click import, and now I'm going to select my LP shield, and I'm going to grab these and say open, import them all. If I double click on the ORM, I turn off the sRGB and hit save. And now I can duplicate a material. Oops, I want to make sure I grab one of these MIs, these material instances. So I'm going to duplicate, do MI underscore shield, open that up. I'm just going to plug my textures in. Oh, interesting side note, you can actually change, right? If I click here, now it's a box. So I'll just hit save. And now if I open up my shield, hit F, click on the viewport, hit F, I can drag that shield material in, and there we go. It looks amazing, right? But if we go to the other side, there's nothing there. That's where I would come in here, and if I, here in the detail, let's go back over to the material, and I'll just bring this over to the side so we can see it. Here's my material instance, and it's using that basic material, but if I use that two-sided one, just drag that over instead, now it's going to draw it as if it had two sides on it. And so having it be two-sided is a more expensive material operation. So that's why we made a special case only from when we would need it. All right, that's the only reason that we would have that there. And so that's the basic process for getting this started. I will do a separate tutorial that's going to kind of talk about how we get our swords to show up, or how we basically can combine our swords and our shields with our weapon rack using a thing called a blueprint, which is, this really is, you know, diminishing what Blueprint does, but it's very similar to grouping. In the way that we're going to use it, it's very similar to grouping in 3ds Max, right? So that's just bringing in your basic prop items into Unreal. You're going to want to make sure you save everything, right? So then next time, if you close this, next time you go to open Unreal, you'll see it listed, or you can just navigate to that folder, right? And if you look, I mentioned everything we bring in is going to get a U asset. If I come up here to ACC Summer, actually if I go up to the actual project, you can see there's a U project. You could just double click on this in order to launch your project. There you go.